Let's face it, folks, these have been difficult times for the Conservatives. We have MPs quitting, chiefs of staff in the Prime Minister's office cutting checks to senators who were at the trough. And the grassroots seems to be growing disenfranchised. Peter Coleman is the president and CEO of the National Citizens Coalition, and he joins me now on 580 CFRA. Good to talk to you.
Thanks for having me on, Rob.
Do you get that sense as well that rank-and-file Conservatives are growing disenfranchised with the Conservative Party, Peter?
I think there's an element there. I think part of the problem, too, is when any government's in power for long enough, I think what happened is I call them the young guys with short pants in the PMO's office, think that they know everything.
Mm-hmm.
They've been around for quite a while now. They haven't tasted defeat. They have a little humility, some of them. And I think the PMO is probably overreached a bit in this process here. And when you have backbench MPs that have less say than 25-year-old guys in the PMO's office, I think you run the risk of this kind of stuff happening, quite frankly.
Yeah. Almost as though it's time for some adult supervision.
Yeah, I agree. And
Yeah.
I think the biggest issue for me, too, is I think when you get involved in business or in issues, when you have trouble, you have to over-communicate, not under-communicate. And Prime Minister Harper is very good at press conferences, knows the files. In these environments, you need to over-communicate and not under-communicate. I think that's the mistake they're making. Now, too, it's making it worse.
Yeah, I've said that quite frequently, that just from a communications standpoint, it certainly doesn't do him any favors to be, I guess while I understand the need for trips abroad and attempts to negotiate trade agreements, and the Prime Minister is a busy man, it does hand his political opponents opposition that he's just ducking the issue and pulling a disappearing act, when the fact is that whenever he is in that environment, whenever he does sit down and take questions from the media, he's very good in that environment.
Yeah, and that's my biggest piece of advice for him. And I know Harper personally, having worked with him for a while, and that's my biggest complaint with the whole operation of the PMO, is he's very good at that. And he should have said at the press conference with the caucus meeting before he went to South America, as you were talking about,
Mm-hmm.
he should have said, "We've made a mistake. We've screwed up. I'm sorry to Canadian taxpayers, and we'll fix it." I mean, people do not mind politicians showing a bit of humility. If he'd done that, this thing probably would have gone away a little faster than it did. Because, let's face it, this might have happened with Mike Duffy and senators there, but I have a tough time believing there aren't senators in the past that have done stuff as equally as bad as Mike Duffy over the last 20 years, and we just don't know about it.
Oh, sure. I mean, we had the Senator Levine from Wakefield using his office staff to cut down bush up in the Upper Gatineau, for crying out loud, and liberal senators who had been living in Mexico, for crying out loud.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
there have been these kinds of things in the past. The liberal senators in many instances historically have not been as pure as the driven snow, but nevertheless, there's no question that this involves a Conservative senator and a Conservative chief of staff, and this is certainly something that is of the Conservatives' making. But moving along to another issue, the whole Rathgaber issue and the decision by him to leave the Conservative fold and sit as an independent because of the gutting of his transparency bill. As the president and CEO of the National Citizens Coalition, how do you feel about that whole thing?
You know what? It's interesting, Rob, because Stephen Taylor, who's one of our national directors who's based in Ottawa, was at the committee speaking about exactly this bill. And he said to the Conservatives there, especially last week, he said, "Be careful what you're thinking of doing," because we were hearing they were going to gut the bill as far as raising the limits as far as disclosure. And Stephen Taylor so aptly said, and we've been saying this for a while, don't gut that bill. People want transparency as far as expenditures, and they did exactly that to one of their own MPs who had a private member bill, which are tough enough to get passed into law at the best of circumstances, and they gutted it for no reason. I mean, for a government that wants transparency and moving the limits up to $400,000 for disclosure, give me a break.
Yeah. Do you think he should have to run in a by-election? He was elected as a Conservative member. Should he, not as an independent, do you think he should run in a by-election?
Rob, I don't like the floor crossing for anybody. It's been going. This isn't the first time it's happened. It happened with Linda Stronach. It happened with David Emerson. they all get sanctimonious about this every party.
Yeah, we had an NDP member leave and go and join the Bloc, for crying out loud.
Yeah, I think the people, to be honest, I wish they would change the laws in Ottawa. If you were elected for a party and you decide to become independent, I think you should have to be forced to go to the polls. No exceptions.
Okay.
Because I think people didn't vote for you as an independent. They voted for you for a certain party. And you didn't get in just because you were a great guy or a great lady. You got in partially because of the party you represent. I think that when you lose that, if you decide you're going to run as independent, go back to the people and get a mandate, because I just think it cheapens the whole political process when people can cross the floor or sit as independents. And I would, no matter what the party is, I think it's wrong.
Yeah. You know, it's important to discuss these side issues, and it's important for the Conservative Party to deal with them, because certainly much of the media, that's what they prefer to focus on. I mean, for example, you know, the GDP numbers that came out recently showed pretty strong economic growth in a pretty weak global economy. Yeah. And the jobs report out today, 90,000 jobs, best job creation in a decade. And most of that, let's face it, and that's good news for Canada, but a lot of it's going to be lost.
Yeah, and the exciting thing is, as a parent with kids in their 20s, that was a lot of the jobs for young kids who are struggling to find jobs. But that goes back to my communication issue. When you have a media that the Conservatives feel, by and large, is not friendly to them, if you over-communicate and have the press conferences you are talking about and answer questions, I mean, go and have a press conference tomorrow and say, we'll talk about Duffy and Wright for 10 minutes. We're going to talk to you for 45 minutes. After 10 minutes, we're moving on. The media would move on. But if you don't fill the vacuum for the media, a lot of them will fill it for you.
Exactly. Yeah. Give me maybe just a couple, in the few minutes that we have here, maybe just a couple of quick bullet points on what else you would recommend that the Conservatives do to right this ship.
Well, the first thing is over-communicate. I think the second thing is you've got to find a way to deal with this transparency issue. I think it's got to be an all-party thing, Rob, led by the Conservatives, saying we're going to pick a number. It could be $100, it could be $200, or we're going to start putting disclosure online for all MPs, all senators, 30 days after the month's over. Online, you can go and see if you are an MP, you can see what you spent. Don't make it $2 because I quite frankly don't care. Pick a number that's not going to be an accounting nightmare.
Yeah. I mean, we do that for City of Ottawa councillors, for crying out loud. Why don't we do it for members of Parliament, right?
Yeah, I think what's too bad is I think there's a lot of honest, hardworking politicians, but when you have the bad eggs, they taint everybody. At the best of time, people don't trust politicians. That's just the reality. So if you have this online disclosure, timely manner for taxpayers, I think you get credibility back for all parties, not just it's the Conservatives today. But Chrétien's government had all kinds of issues too. I mean, it goes on and on and on. We got to find a way to solve it so people get some faith back in the system.
Good to talk to you today.
You too. Have a nice weekend.
Yeah, you too. Peter Coleman is the president and CEO of the National Citizens Coalition.